Fall, for centuries across cultures, has been a sign of blessing, symbolizing newness of life. But this best friend of man is also sometimes his worst enemy, as in the last decade, the number of flood events, riverine flood, flash flood in many West African countries have increased dramatically. According to a 2018 report by the Red Cross, an estimated 1.4 million people in Nigeria were affected by floods by September of that year. From July into September, heavy rainfall caused Nigeria's two main rivers, the Niger and the Benue, to burst their banks. The resultant disaster affected at least 34 of the country's 36 states and had caused 141 deaths and 265 injuries by September 2018. It is a similar story across other West African countries where flooding remains a major environmental challenge. From Cotonou to Ouagadougou, Accra to Abidjan, homes have been submerged with families displaced. The memories of the disasters are forever fresh in the people's minds.
Bridge wa ó máa ń kún gan tó dúdú bá ti rọ̀ báyìí ó máa kún tí gbogbo ẹ̀ máa kún débi a máa wo òkè lọ́hùn yẹn àwọn tó bá ń ti gbòòrò bọ̀ kò sáyè láti wọlé mọ́ torí pé omi ti gba ojú ọ̀nà then àwọn tó bá ń bọ̀ látòkè ọlọ́mọ máa wọ ọmọ lọ́ọ̀kan oní aláya máa wọ aya lọ́ọ̀kan kò sọ́nà láti gbà ó gbé ẹnìkan lọ ní òkè ń bẹ̀ yẹn bó tiẹ̀ jẹ́ pé kì í ti ṣe tíbí ní òkè ń bí báyìí ó gbé ẹnìkan lọ.
ìgbà tí tódò yìí kọ́kọ́ bẹ̀rẹ̀ ọ̀rọ̀ tí mo sọ ẹ̀ bíi kí n bá fi wé kí n wò pé bí a tún ti 2015 lọ̀rọ̀ tí mo sọ ẹ̀ tódò yìí bẹ̀rẹ̀ òjò yìí àti ẹ̀kọ́ wò pé ṣé ó máa pọ̀ àbí kò ní pọ̀ ṣé ó máa pọ̀ àbí kò ní pọ̀ gbogbo àwọn tó wà ní ṣọ́ọ̀bù yìí everybody wọn náà ló wà ń bẹ̀ kómi náà tó everything wà ń bẹ̀ so ẹ̀kan náà àwa la sọ fáwọn ìyá yìí pé omi yẹn mà ti ń kùn àwọn náà ti ń tẹ̀sẹ̀ sáré palẹ̀ mọ́ ọjọ́ yẹn gangan la gbọ́ pódò gbé èèyàn méjì lọ́nà eléwúrẹ́ níbi odò tó wà bí eléwúrẹ́ níbi tòsí ọ̀dọ̀ wa bíbí ló gbé èèyàn méjì kọjá lọ́nà bíi torí omi yẹn kún gbogbogbò bíi ni wọn ti ṣe gbogbo bíríìjì yìí gbà yẹn wọn ì ṣe gbogbo ilé wọn ì ṣe bíríìjì rárá wọn ì dáwọ́lé àti ẹ̀ tí ì ní lọ́kàn kan fẹ́ ṣe bíríìjì gan so ìgbà yẹn gangan lọ̀rọ̀ yẹn tún wá dẹ́kọ́rọ̀ yẹn tún wá mú àwọn tó wà ládùúgbò ló wá mú wọn lọ́kùnkúndùn pé kí ló dé àti gbọ́ àwọn tá à ń gbàdúgbò bíi omi kàn kún ẹlòmíì ò lè gbélé ẹ̀mọ́ ẹlòmíì ti sá dànù omi ti lé wọn dànù ó ti sọ láńlọ́ọ̀dù èmi ó ti sọ di tẹ́láǹtì.
Ok, alors nous avons été victimes de plusieurs inondations depuis 2010, mais la plus grave a eu lieu le 19 juin 2018. Et ça, je dis la plus grave parce que il y a eu mort d'homme. On a une voisine qui a été emportée par les eaux de ruissellement. Et puis il y a eu d'importants dégâts matériels. Je précise que ce sont des inondations par des eaux de ruissellement qui viennent en fait de l'amont de notre quartier. Effectivement, on a été, notre cité est malheureusement dans une vallée. Et donc ça fait que quand il y a les pluies, disons les eaux de ruissellement, en tout cas se déversent dans notre cité. Alors, les premières inondations, donc depuis 2010, étaient de moindre intensité. Bon, malheureusement, mais quand je dis moindre intensité, elles ont quand même dépassé au niveau de la hauteur des eaux 1 mètre. Par contre, celle de 2018, par endroit, la hauteur des eaux a atteint 2 mètres.
There have been interventions from governments backed by foreign supports. Communities have organized to help themselves. Several agencies have been set up to find solutions, and every year, citizens receive promises of succor in their communities.
Alors, malheureusement, force est de reconnaître que c'est toujours, on constate toujours une sorte de médecin après la mort. Une fois, il y a les inondations, en tout cas passées avant 2018, les autorités venaient là, nous voir, soutenir, faire de la compassion et tout. Et malheureusement, ce n'était pas suivi d'effet. Par contre, en 2018, là aussi, même 2018 où il y a eu vraiment des grands... On a reçu la visite de compassion du président de la République, le 20 juin 2018. Donc il est venu nous rendre visite pour se rendre compte quand même de la gravité de la situation. Et j'ai eu l'opportunité donc de lui parler et je lui ai dit ceci. Nous avons un plaidoyer, président. Cette cité, elle a été construite selon un dossier technique qui est déposé au ministère de la Construction. Donc ce n'est pas un quartier spontané.
For a long time, we had a very low bridge, which used to create problems for us. Anytime it rained, it flooded. And at a point in time when the past governor came into office, he did the bridge. They constructed the bridge for us, which made things better. But we still had problems with flooding, because that never stopped the problem. And anytime it rained, most time people will have to park their cars for the bridge and wait until it subsided. Sometimes in the night, they will have to leave the vehicles there, till the following day. And we faced that for many years, for almost 10 years.
Títí tán bá a ṣe lọ́wọ́, then gọ́dà tán bá a ṣe lọ́wọ́ tán ti parí. Ìyẹn náà fà á. Àgbàrá òjò yẹn ti pọ̀ jù fún wa, torí ó ń bọ jàjẹ́, ó ń bọ oríṣiríṣi nǹkan jẹ́nu ṣọ́ọ̀bù. Tó bá délẹ̀ tán sí gan, àwa gan láǹfààní àti dúró síbí. Ó dá mi láàmú gan. Even ó wọnú ṣọ́ọ̀bù mi, ó bà freezer mi jẹ́, sáàbù mi wà ńbẹ̀, ó bàjẹ́.
Alors, on va se focaliser sur la dernière inondation de 2018. Alors là, on a reçu un soutien plutôt des clubs services, des ONG surtout, qui étaient les premiers à venir sur les lieux, à nous soutenir, surtout la communauté catholique, etc. Maintenant, par la suite, la solidarité nationale est intervenue au niveau des vivres.
But beyond the provision of shelter and relief materials like food, cash, healthcare, water, sanitation and hygiene, there must be more that can be done before, during and after flood disasters happen. GMES, an Africa Support Program, started with the 2006 agreement by the African Union Commission (AUC) and the European Union Commission (EUC) on the need to expand the use of satellite Earth observation data to address environmental and security challenges.
Well, I have to take you back to the request of the African leaders, which is called the Maputo Declaration back in 2006, requesting the European Union Commission to assist Africa with a similar infrastructure, which is also called GMES in Europe that time, and which has now been named Copernicus. Seeing what Earth observation can do, and the fact that the European Union have developed it to solve many problems, especially the environment problem and civil security, the African leaders actually demanded for similar structure to be established in Africa. So back in 2016, December, AU, African Union Commission, and the European Union Commission signed an agreement to implement GMES. Back in 2017, April, the advert for proposal came out for institutions to apply. and for Africa for the first time to come together and form consortium in the implementation of various projects which are of priority for various regions in Africa. That we felt, let's go into riverine water that causes flood. And that is why we made a proposal and submitted this in April 2017. We invited partners, and we now have 7 institutions located within 5 countries, which include Nigeria, Ghana, Burkina Faso, Cote d'Ivoire, and Benin. And we happen to be the lead when we are writing the proposal. Many institutions wrote this, but only 13 consortia were finally granted the projects based on their proposal. Our own proposal is about multi-scale flood monitoring and assessment services for West Africa.
The Global Monitoring for Environment and Security in Africa, GMES and Africa, took off, and the multi-scale flood monitoring and assessment services for West Africa, MiFMASS, was born.
The space science will tell them where to sit, where to have and to build their houses. Secondly, the space science can tell them what was or what is the impact of the flood, and even can provide them with ammunition to mitigate the flooding issues. Before building their houses, before building their asset, they have to know where to do it. And the space science will provide them with this information.
There's been a lot of initiatives already going on in Ghana and then in the ECOWAS region to tackle this flooding issue. And in Ghana, there's been a number of projects aiming at developing early warning systems as well as using both structural and non-structural approach to mitigating flood issues. But not much has been done in terms of taking advantage of Earth observation data or information to enhance the way we manage flood issues in the country. And therefore the MiFMASS project comes with that advantage that we can make use of these Earth observation data to enhance the way we manage flood.
Donc le projet MiFMASS dans lequel donc va participer le CURAT, qui est un centre de recherche et d'application en télédétection. Le CURAT va donc, à partir de son expertise, apporter des solutions au niveau de la conception de la base de données, au niveau du traitement des images satellitaires et au niveau de la modélisation du phénomène d'inondation. Maintenant, ça, qu'est-ce que la population cible va avoir comme bénéfice dans ce projet? C'est que l'inondation qui affecte gravement l'économie du pays, qui affecte gravement les populations civiles, en travaillant ou en étudiant ce phénomène, on va pouvoir amoindrir ses effets sur la population. En étudiant ce phénomène d'inondation, on va pouvoir amoindrir son impact sur l'économie, son impact sur la population.
With that advantage, the project has enjoyed massive cooperation from all the partners across the West African countries involved because they all feel the pain.
Climate change concerns all the world, but it seems worse in some countries like Burkina Faso, because we are in the Sahel region where things are changing. Climate change in Burkina Faso can be seen in two ways. The drought, and when it's raining a lot. In one day, you can have a lot of water, and this can create a lot of disaster. And because the municipalities are not very prepared to fight or to stand it, the resilience is very low.
The incidences of flood within West Africa generally, and then in Ghana in particular, has been on the ascendancy, particularly from the year 2010. In Ghana, we've almost always had a flood. It has become an annual event, basically. And that has led to the loss of lives and properties that are valued in billions of dollars. So there is a huge loss to the country with this flood event, and something seriously has to be done about that. Otherwise, then the country will run into developmental challenges, because you have to channel much of your funds to addressing these flooding issues.
La question d'inondation est préoccupante. Chaque année, dans le bassin de la Volta, nous enregistrons par endroits, soit au niveau des villes ou dans la vallée du fleuve Volta ou ses affluents, des cas d'inondation qui causent des dégâts énormes sur le business des populations. Regardez un paysan qui a son champ de riz ou bien qui a les productions maraîchères, son champ en tout cas, du jour au lendemain, il revient le matin, il voit que tout est sous l'eau. Ça fait des pertes énormes. Il y a le cas particulier des inondations en 2017, août 2017 au Burkina. Sur les 13 régions que compte le Burkina, 12 étaient touchées. Près de 15 000 habitations détruites, avec 12 morts. Oui, s'il y avait eu des prévisions, si la population était d'avance informée, ils prendraient les dispositions nécessaires pour ne pas subir toutes ces pertes. C'est pourquoi nous, au niveau de l'autorité du bassin de la Volta, nous développons des programmes, nous participons à des programmes régionaux tels que GMS pour pouvoir mettre en place des systèmes d'information et des modèles de prévision sur les inondations et voire même les sécheresses. Quand il n'y a pas d'inondation, c'est plutôt les sécheresses aussi. On peut prévoir les cycles de sécheresse à partir des données météo.
We are happy to have this joint program because, you know, flooding does not know a border. Yeah. Flooding, it could occur and it could affect Benin, Nigeria, Togo, Ghana, and so on. Flooding does not respect our border. So we need to work together. We scientists from Africa, we need to work together to find some solution for our daily problems, for our communities' problems.
All the partners have since been working in communities that have suffered flooding in recent times, which they have chosen as the study sites for each country. It is the best way to demonstrate what space technology is capable of doing.
The focus is to actually use Earth observation data to manage the environment and mitigate the effect of the climate change. Because with satellite data, you are looking at the Earth from something above the Earth. It is easy to get many information that you can use to manage the environment, and at the same time to ensure civil security. And lastly, this fits in very well with the Sustainable Development Goals, which we are hoping to achieve by 2030.
In Nigeria, Ibadan, the Oyo State capital, is the study site. The ancient city has since the 1980s built a reputation for its perennial flood disasters, with the Ogunpa River known to be notorious. As it is in Ibadan, much of the flood incidents in West Africa have been blamed on people's attitude.
Kí ọ̀rọ̀ tó block bí báyìí àwọn kan tó bá gbé mọ́tò dání báyìí a rí pé láti inú mọ́tò yẹn wọ́n á kàn náà mú ìdọ̀tí ìgbà nínú mọ́tò ṣùgbọ́n tá a bá ti rí wọn bẹ́ẹ̀ yẹn á pariwo lé wọn pé àbáwo lélẹ́yìí ṣe jẹ́ ẹ̀ ń kó bá wa ń bí báyìí ká mọ̀ bí gbogbo ẹ ṣe máa wà ní ètò kí ẹnikẹ́ni kó mọ̀ ju nǹkan sí inú odò tàbí kẹ́yìn tó jọ mọ́ ìdọ̀tí torí ẹ̀ báyìí àgbákólẹ̀ kó dẹ̀ tó ń bá wa kó tẹ bá wo ẹ̀yìn bẹ́ẹ̀ yẹn kíní tá à ń dalẹ̀ sí ó wà ń bẹ̀ àgbà ìkólẹ̀ tán wá ń bá wa dà lóṣù ní bí ẹ̀ẹ̀mejì lóṣù so àwọn tí ò bá tí ì ní kí wọ́n jọ kí wọ́n ní nǹkan dalẹ̀ sí torí pé ìyẹn ló máa ràn wá lọ́wọ́ ńgbà tí ò bá di pé wọ́n ń da nǹkan sí ojú odò tí omi ń rí bí sàn lọ́gẹ̀rẹ̀ wàhálà ò ní sí.
Bad waste management and indiscriminate building construction are the most common. This is Abidjan, the capital of Côte d'Ivoire. It is a similar story.
Le constat que nous faisons, c'est que ce n'est pas autant les pluies qui tombent dans notre cité, c'est plutôt les eaux de ruissellement qui viennent des cités environnantes, en amont de notre cité. Et nous avons mis en place un comité de crise qui a donc étudié le pourquoi de ces inondations, surtout la dernière, puisque vraiment là, il y a eu mort d'homme. Alors, et on s'est rendu compte que, en fait, la cause de ces inondations-là est imputable, en fait, à l'insuffisance et surtout à la défaillance des canalisations de drainage et d'évacuation de ces eaux-là. Voilà. Pourquoi? Parce que les quartiers qui entourent le nôtre, notre quartier date de 1989. Voilà. Et on a constaté que les installations depuis cette date-là n'ont pas été actualisées. Et après, il y a eu une floraison de nouveaux quartiers. Palmeraie, Bonoumet, etc. C'était la nature, la végétation. Malheureusement, ces quartiers sont devenus, ça a été urbanisé, c'est du béton. Et donc l'eau ne s'infiltre pas, l'eau ruisselle. Et comme les installations de drainage et d'assainissement n'ont pas été actualisées, c'est évident que l'eau a ruisselé et tombé dans notre cité qui est dans une vallée. Voilà. Donc nous, en tout cas au niveau des causes, vraiment nous pensons que si on avait travaillé en amont, on aurait évité, comment on appelle ça, ces dégâts-là.
Yeah. So here we are in the valley, and normally there is a connection from that place to go straight to the lake, because the neighbor is not so far from here. So there is only one drainage for water that has been bought by the Siwa company at the beginning. So it's still the same Siwa system that exists up to now. So you can imagine that now the population are increased. Demography is very important. Urbanization takes a lot of place.
With the support of all citizens, government as well as environmental and disaster management agencies, by the end of the multi-scale flood monitoring and assessment services, MiFMASS, citizens will have new stories to tell. But there is a lot of work to be done.
How do we measure that we have really delivered? This is not a research project. This is services. How do we combine all what we know in forecasting about events that will happen? So in that sense, we are creating a database across West Africa, for example. Because there's a river that took off from Futajalo across most countries in Africa and deposited itself into Nigeria Delta. Anything that affects that river will have effect on all these tributaries and all these smaller rivers here and there, and that has a lot of effect on the course of the river, on the communities around there. So the targets are mainly at two levels. Demonstrate to the mandated agencies with regards to why don't you use data this way to support your work. In that sense, they are also our targeted users. How do we now reach the local communities in their own language? Which type of services do we need to provide for them so that they will be able to understand and believe the government services? So it's services we are providing. That services now will now be transferred to the mandated agency to continue to work on it based on a common one developed by the region.
As we are researchers, we can from historical data of rainfall, extreme rainfall, and also from data from flux data. We can anticipate this phenomenon and help population to take some disposition in order to avoid deaths, in order to avoid to lose their production or what they used to produce. So in order to reduce disasters.
With regard to flood management, one of the important tools that you need is a flood event database because it allows you to understand the trends in flood over the years, and particularly if it's georeferenced, then you can understand where is the flood happening and on what magnitude and what extent of damage do you have from those regions. Therefore, this project MiFMASS is keen on developing a regional flood event database and then strengthening the national institutions to have their own flood event database. So basically the national flood event databases will be harmonized through this regional flood event database that we are aiming to create. And the reason we are aiming to create that regional flood event database is because quite a number of the flood events we have are transboundary. That means they cut across different countries. If you take Ghana and Burkina Faso as an example, there is always an annual flood event in the white water, which is between Ghana and Burkina Faso. And therefore, it's important to understand the flood issues at the bigger scale in terms of the entire basin, not just restricted to each country, so that together the two countries can have a holistic approach to managing that. Other than that, you have a situation where one country is doing something to manage it, the other country is doing something different, and then they become counterproductive. But you don't want to do that because resources are scarce and you want to optimize the available resources in managing flood issues across countries.
But this has its own challenges, as highlighted by partners in the consortium during their first regional meeting held in Abidjan from August 13th to August 16th, 2019.
We also expect of government to support us, to encourage the institutions to provide us the needed data. Because some of the institutions require us to pay for the data that we will use to develop tools to help them finally. Some of them still require us to pay for the data. What we expect of the government of Ghana or government of any other country within the project area is to be able to encourage the institutions to give us the data for free. We will develop the tools which will end up being used by them to help solve problems.
But often these informations are lacking within the national institutions that are supposed to have them for management. And also that when they exist, there are some important variables that there is no data on, which is understandable because most of the institutions managing flood are more recently set up. So they have not been in the business of collecting data in the past and are now relying on newspaper items for collecting data. And much of the data that you need are not recorded in the news papers. And therefore, it's important that each national agency for managing flood will have a flood event database, a proper flood event database that among other things allows you to do some basic graphical analysis to see and understand the trends within your flooding event.
In spite of the challenges, the consortium is undeterred in its resolve to bring West Africa's flooding challenges under control using a model jointly developed by the African experts.
Keep in mind that the predecessors did fantastic and wonderful job, but flooding is not something you can mitigate once for all. It is an ongoing work. And while we move forward, the technologies are being improved, and it gives and provides more information, more strategies, etc.
So it's services we are providing. That services now will now be transferred to the mandated agency to continue to work on it based on a common one developed by the region. So some of the services are this. One, we have what we call flood forecasting. The flood forecasting, our major target users are the local communities. We need to now tell them, do you use SMS for those of them? You see, yes, if it is green, no problem, stay around. Because some of them are fishermen, some of them are farmers, some of them don't have money to move to the inlands to build big houses. They live their life in the common town, villages and all the rest. Another product is the forecast map. The local people may not be able to read anything about forecast map. The forecast map are produced after after finalizing the model, and we generate it as a product. This will be for the disaster monitoring organizations, for the Met organizations. We will then need to get it across to them, tell them how we produce it, so that when we leave it for them, they can continue with it. Another major product is capacity building. Some of these DMOs may not have used this data before. We're now going to give them capacity, training, and show them how to download this data, how to process it, how to run it through the model, how to do the analysis, and then come up with these services.
However, the people still believe their governments hold the key to their freedom from perennial flood disasters.
A rọ ìjọba wọ́n bá wa gbé ìgbésẹ̀ tó fi máa dùn kíákíá. Ọlọ́run á ràn wọ́n lọ́wọ́. Ọlọ́run ò ní pín wọ́n nípa o.
A dẹ̀ bẹ̀ àwọn gọ́fúnà wa kan jọ kán bá wa ṣe ojú ọ̀nà yìí torí pé ó ń wà fẹ́ tiwa púpọ̀ tójò bá rọ̀ a kì í rí ibi gbà lólé tó jẹ́ pé ọ̀pọ̀ gbà míì gan ibi tá a máa lọ gbà gan ó jìnnà sí àdúgbò wa pẹ̀lú bí bíríìjì tó ń dẹ̀ bá wa ṣe yìí ibẹ̀ ò ṣe ìdọ̀tí wọ́n ń dà sí a dẹ̀ bẹ̀ wọ́n kún lórúkọ Ọlọ́run Ọlọ́run á ràn wọ́n lọ́wọ́.
J'avoue que nous, en tant que victimes, on s'attendait à plus. On s'attendait à plus, mais au-delà de... Bon, nous sommes des croyants, au-delà du dédommagement et tout ça, c'est ce que nous disons qu'il faut agir sur les causes en amont pour éviter que chaque fois, on vienne pleurer sur les conséquences. Maintenant, au niveau des dédommagements, on sait qu'on n'est pas les seuls à avoir été impactés. Ce que nous avons souhaité, c'est vraiment, ne serait-ce qu'un dédommagement symbolique pour que les Ivoiriens que nous sommes, que nous sachions qu'au moins en pareille circonstance, on a eu la compassion de notre gouvernement. Surtout que nous avons eu la chance d'avoir la visite de compassion du président le 20 juin 2018. Malheureusement, depuis 2018, on n'a pas été dédommagé, voilà, même de façon symbolique.
With the issue of flooding, we believe that, of course, it can't be enough. It can never be enough because it's an area that is growing, that is developing. So we certainly need more from government to do for us, because we see some other roads that are also important that needs to be tarred.
Citizens will always make requests and demand action from their governments, but this is not just about government.
We need to involve the communities because they are the ones who built on water pathways. They are the ones whose behavior lead to devastations. So to be effective, we have to engage the communities, tell them the best way to be able to contain excess water when it occurs. So people should not build in waterways. All the drains should be de-choked. It is silted, especially during the rainy season, so that we'll be able to contain floods.
Il faut que nous jouions notre rôle de chercheurs pour que nous puissions réellement mettre sur pied des outils d'aide à la décision qui vont permettre de simplifier la vie au quotidien aux populations, surtout permettre aux populations qu'elles ne soient pas surprises par ces phénomènes qui interviendront à coup sûr. Ces phénomènes interviendront, mais si on peut anticiper sur leur occurrence, ça va permettre de ne plus être surpris, de ne plus connaître des dégâts importants et de ne pas être, comment dirais-je, de ne plus être fataliste, d'accord? Comme quoi, c'est Dieu qui l'a voulu. Non, Dieu ne veut jamais que ses enfants souffrent. Et c'est pourquoi il a doté chaque peuple, chaque population, chaque pays des ressources, tant intellectuelles, naturelles et autres.
Je voudrais terminer mon intervention par lancer un appel solennel aux chefs religieux, aux responsables administratifs politiques d'être proactifs dans la dissémination de l'information liée aux prévisions hydrologiques, notamment sur l'avènement des inondations. Je voudrais également demander aux autorités administratives politiques qui s'occupent des questions de cadastre de faire un grand effort, créer des parcs, des jardins, au lieu de recaser les populations sur des zones inondables. Les recaser dans les zones inondables accentue, augmente les risques de perte de vie, des risques de perte de leur maison, etc., etc. Aux techniciens des instituts, les universités de recherche, etc., je voudrais les inviter à s'associer pour développer des produits fiables, pour asseoir des prévisions réalistes et développer des canaux d'information impliquant les radios communautaires, les radios locales, les systèmes d'internet, les systèmes de téléphone pour informer en temps réel les populations qui, une fois informées, prendront les dispositions nécessaires pour atténuer, réduire les risques, les impacts liés aux inondations qui sont annoncées. Voilà ce que je voudrais dire. Ce n'est pas affaire d'une personne, mais c'est l'affaire de toute une communauté et les populations et les scientifiques, les techniciens et les politiciens et les administratifs. Tous, on doit lutter, on doit aller ensemble pour faire face aux effets des inondations en vue de les amoindrir.
Je voudrais aussi signaler le fait que par nos comportements dans la vie quotidienne, notamment ceux qui versent les ordures dans les caniveaux, qui versent les ordures dans le système de drainage des eaux usées. Par ces actions-là, nous amplifions le phénomène d'inondation. Parce que ces ordures que nous versons dans la canalisation, ces ordures-là se retrouvent quelque part et bloquent le chemin à l'eau, ce qui va notamment générer des inondations. Il y a aussi des personnes qui construisent des bâtiments ou en tout cas des infrastructures sur les réseaux d'assainissement, ce qui augmente également, qui amplifie également le phénomène d'inondation lorsqu'il pleut. Parce que l'eau n'arrive plus à circuler, tout est bouché. Et là, franchement, j'en appelle aux autorités pour que ces bâtiments ou ces structures, ces infrastructures qui sont déposés sur les canalisations, sur le réseau d'assainissement, et qui bloquent notamment la circulation de l'eau, il faut que les autorités fassent l'effort de dégager tout ce monde-là pour que les canaux de circulation des eaux soient plus ou moins libérés.
If we are looking for solution for you, don't be part of the problem. The focus of these services we are trying to develop is for the main beneficiary, which are the locals, the communities. Remember that the river has been there before the community settled. The community met the river there. They have to give it its natural course, allow it to go. But when you are building on those their course, lójú ọ̀gbàrá kẹ́ máa dalẹ̀ síbẹ̀, kẹ́ máa kọ́lé síbẹ̀, á lọ ya bá ẹlòmíì. It will be a problem for the others. Don't do that.
By the time government and their agencies adopt the MiFMASS methodologies across these 5 West African countries, there will be a clearer direction on how to protect lives and property from ruin, and Africa's economy will be better for it.